The morning sun poured through the big windows of the small diner, casting a warm glow on the checkered tables and the worn-out counter. The smell of frying bacon and fresh coffee filled the air. Outside, the street was quiet, just a few early risers walking dogs or heading to work. Inside, the diner hummed with its usual calm energy. The woman who ran it moved behind the counter with practiced ease, pouring coffee, refilling sugar jars, and greeting every customer with a smile. She was small but strong, the kind of presence that made people feel seen and heard. Everyone in the neighborhood knew her and trusted her, not just because of her food, but because of the way she treated people. She had a reputation for fairness and kindness, and there was something about the way she stood that made people respect her, even without knowing her well. She wiped her hands on a towel and glanced out the window, noticing a man walking quickly along the sidewalk. He was tall, with dark leather riding gear and a chain around his neck that glinted in the morning sun. His hair was hidden under a helmet, but she could see the tension in the way he moved, the quick glances over his shoulder. Something about him made her pause. He seemed desperate. Then she saw the flashing lights behind him. A police car racing down the street, sirens blaring. People on the sidewalk froze, unsure what to do, and she felt her heart skip a beat. The man reached her door in a rush, pushing it open before she could even react. "Please," he said, his voice low but urgent. "I need a place to hide." She looked at him, her eyes wide for a moment, but then something inside her told her to act. She didn't even ask questions. She simply nodded and stepped aside. "You can stay here," she said firmly, her voice steady, "but no trouble in my diner. You understand?" He nodded quickly, relief flashing across his face. "Thank you," he said, and then ducked behind the counter just as the police car skidded to a stop outside. Two officers got out, moving fast and shouting for the man to come out. She walked to the door and faced them, standing tall. "He's not coming out," she said calmly. "You can't come in here without a warrant." The officers exchanged a glance, surprise clear on their faces. They were not used to being challenged, especially not by someone so unassuming. "Ma'am, step aside," one of them said, trying to sound authoritative. "This is police business." "No," she said firmly. "This is my diner. You step in without proper reason and you'll be crossing the line." She held her ground, looking each officer in the eye. She could feel the tension building, the weight of the moment pressing down on her, but she refused to flinch. She had faced difficult situations before, and she knew when to stand firm. The officers muttered between themselves, clearly frustrated. They weren't expecting this kind of resistance, especially not from a small diner owner. After a tense moment, they backed off, giving her a hard look but leaving. She could feel her body trembling slightly from the adrenaline, but she didn't show it. She closed the door and leaned against it, taking a deep breath. The man peeked out from behind the counter, his eyes wide with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and there was a ruggedness to him, but his expression showed genuine relief. She shook her head, waving off the thanks. "Don't worry about it," she said softly. "Just stay quiet, eat something, and we'll figure things out." He sat at a corner table, careful to keep his distance from the other customers, though they mostly hadn't noticed him. She brought him a plate of eggs and toast along with a cup of coffee. He took it with trembling hands and sipped slowly, savoring the warmth. For a moment he seemed almost human, not just a man running from the law, not just a tough exterior in leather and chains. He seemed tired, scared, and in need of someone who wouldn't judge him. She returned to the counter, serving regular customers, but kept a watchful eye on him. The diner was small, and it was impossible not to notice someone in distress. Every now and then he would glance at her, a silent thank you in his eyes. She offered him a few words of reassurance, simple things that meant a lot. "You're safe here," she said. "Just breathe. Everything will be okay for now." Outside, the town started to stir more fully. People went about their routines, unaware of the drama unfolding inside the small diner. But word has a way of traveling, and she could feel it. There was something in the air, a shift that made the regular rhythm of the morning feel different. She tried to stay calm, focusing on the work at hand, but her mind kept drifting back to the man and the police. He finally spoke after a while, his voice quieter, almost hesitant. Why would you do this for me?" he asked. "People like me usually don't get kindness from strangers." She smiled softly, drying a plate with her towel. "I don't care about the labels people put on you," she said. "Everyone deserves a little humanity. You're just a person like anyone else." Today you needed help and I could give it. That's all there is to it." He seemed to consider her words, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. He nodded once, slowly. I've never met anyone like you," he said. "Most people would have turned me away, called the cops themselves." "I know," she said simply. "But that's not me." Time passed, and eventually the diner grew quieter again. The morning rush ended, leaving a few stragglers at tables. She watched him eat, noticing the small human details, the way he held his fork, the way he seemed to relax ever so slightly. He was no longer just a figure fleeing danger. He was a man with fears and needs just like everyone else. By mid-morning, he was ready to leave. He approached her, hesitation clear in his movements. "I should go," he said. "They'll come back eventually, and I can't stay here forever." She nodded, understanding. "I know," she said. "Just remember today. Remember that people can help each other. And be careful out there." He looked at her, gratitude and something more lingering in his eyes. "I won't forget," he said quietly. Then he walked out the door, disappearing down the street, leaving only the faint rumble of his bike behind. She watched him go, her heart still racing from the events of the morning. She knew she had done the right thing, even if it was risky. Her diner returned to its normal rhythm, but something had changed. She could feel it, a ripple in the quiet town, a story waiting to be told. The customers returned to their meals, chatting and laughing as if nothing had happened, but she remained thoughtful. She understood the consequences of her actions, but she also knew that courage sometimes meant standing alone, even for a few moments. And today she had done exactly that. As the morning sun climbed higher, she moved behind the counter again, wiping down tables, pouring coffee, and serving food. But her mind lingered on the man who had come to her door, the fear in his eyes and the gratitude that followed. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain. She had made a difference, even if it was just for a few hours. And sometimes that was enough. After the man left the diner that morning, the quiet lingered longer than usual. The woman cleaned the table slowly, her mind still turning over what had happened. There was something about him that stuck with her, not just the fear in his eyes, but the way he seemed human despite the tough exterior. She had seen a lot of people in her life, good and bad, but there was a difference between someone dangerous and someone who simply found themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time. She knew he belonged to a world most people feared, a world of leather jackets, motorcycles, and rules that outsiders couldn't understand. Yet, for a few hours, he had been just a man needing help, and she had given it without hesitation. By the next day, she found herself thinking about him often. She remembered the way he had sipped his coffee like it was the first warm drink he'd had in days. The way his hands had trembled slightly as he ate. She could see the gratitude in his eyes, a quiet honesty that people rarely showed her. She wondered who he really was behind the biker persona, behind the tough exterior and chains that marked him as a member of the Hells Angels. Most people would only see him as trouble. But she saw something else, a man who was scared, who had survived a lot, and who deserved a moment of peace. The woman's curiosity grew, but she never intended to pry. She believed in giving people space and letting them reveal themselves if they wanted to. Later that afternoon, she was wiping down the counter when the man appeared again. Not rushed, not panicked, but calm and deliberate. He didn't look around nervously. Instead, he moved with a quiet confidence that came from years of living on the edge. She felt a mixture of surprise and relief. "I wanted to come back," he said quietly. "I needed to say thank you properly." He pulled off his helmet, revealing short, dark hair and eyes that were sharp but not unkind. There was a calmness in him now that had not been there the day before. "You could have turned me away," he continued, "or worse. But you didn't. You helped me when you didn't even know me." She shook her head, giving a small smile. "It wasn't about knowing you," she said. "It was about doing what felt right. You were in need and I helped. That's all there is to it." He studied her for a moment, as if trying to read every line of her face. "Most people see people like me as dangerous," he said quietly. "But you saw me as a person. That's rare. I don't know how to explain it, but it means a lot." She gestured toward the counter. "Sit down. Have some coffee. Let's talk if you want." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded and took a seat at the same table he had the day before. She poured him a cup of coffee, the warmth of it filling the small space between them. As he drank, he began to talk carefully, as if measuring his words. He told her a little about his life, not the illegal things, not the trouble that most people assumed he carried. but about the hardships, the roads he had traveled, the friends he had lost along the way. He spoke of family he had left behind, of people he cared about, and of the strange freedom he felt on a motorcycle. She listened, nodding, letting him speak without interruption. There was no judgment in her eyes, no curiosity that demanded answers. She simply listened, and that seemed to mean more than anything else he had experienced recently. "You ever feel like the world only sees one side of you?" he asked at one point, his voice low. "Like no matter what you do, people judge you for the clothes you wear, the people you hang around with, or the mistakes you've made?" She thought about it, pouring herself a cup of coffee as she considered her response. "All the time," she admitted. "But I've learned that what people see isn't always the truth. You can't control how they think, only how you act. You can choose to be good even if the world thinks you're something else." He nodded slowly, a faint smile forming. "You make it sound easy," he said, though she could see he knew it wasn't. Life had taught him lessons that were harsh, but somehow her words gave him a small comfort. They sat in silence for a while, letting the quiet of the diner fill the space. Outside, the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the street. The regular customers had left, leaving only the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional clink of a dish being washed. For a moment, it felt like the world outside didn't exist, like they were in a bubble of calm and understanding. "You ever think about changing everything?" he asked suddenly, his voice low, "walking away from all of it? Leaving the biker life, the fights, the constant running?" She considered him carefully. "I think about change all the time," she said. "But it has to come from inside. You can't escape who you are by running away. You can only change by deciding to be different, one step at a time." He leaned back, thoughtful. "You make it sound simple," he said again, but this time there was no sarcasm, only a trace of hope. He had spent years living a life that was harsh and unforgiving, and in her presence he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: safety, and maybe even a little trust. The conversation turned then to lighter things. They spoke about food, about coffee, about the small joys in life that most people overlooked. He laughed quietly at a story she told about a customer who had tried to eat pancakes with a fork and spoon at the same time, and failed miserably. The sound surprised him, a warm human sound that hadn't echoed in his life in a long time. She laughed too, and for a brief moment, the tough biker facade seemed to melt away. She noticed the way he relaxed in her presence, the way his shoulders dropped, the tension leaving his body in slow, measured movements. It was a subtle thing, but she recognized it instantly. People rarely got a chance to just be themselves, especially in his world where appearances and reputations mattered more than honesty and kindness. She was offering him something he had almost forgotten existed, a simple human connection. Hours passed, and eventually, the diner grew quiet again. Evening light spilled across the tables, and the smell of fried food lingered in the air. He stood stretching, and she could see the decision weighing on him. "I should get going," he said softly. "But I'll remember today. You didn't just give me coffee and food. You reminded me there's more to life than what people see from the outside." She nodded, feeling a quiet pride. "Just remember," she said, "kindness is never wasted. Even when it seems small, it can mean everything to someone who needs it." He hesitated, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a small leather bracelet. It was simple but carefully made, and he handed it to her. "Take this," he said. "It's not much, but it's a token. Something to remember today by, and something to remember that not everyone is alone in this world." She accepted it with a small smile. "I'll keep it," she said. "Thank you." He turned, walking toward the door with a new calmness in his step. She watched him go, feeling that strange mixture of relief and uncertainty that comes after helping someone in need. She didn't know when or if she would see him again, but she felt certain that the connection they had formed was real and lasting. After he left, she sat quietly at the counter, thinking about everything that had happened. She realized that moments like these were rare, moments where someone came into your life unexpectedly and left an impact that stayed with you long after they were gone. It was a reminder that courage and kindness were not just words. They were actions that could change someone's world in ways you might never see. As night fell, she closed the diner, locking the doors and cleaning the last few dishes. The streets were empty, the town calm and still. She thought about the man, about the trust he had shown her, and about the way she had chosen to stand up for him. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about doing what was right when it mattered most. And in doing so, she had reminded herself, and maybe him too, that there was still goodness in the world even for people who seemed lost or misunderstood. The next morning, the diner felt different. The woman noticed it the moment she opened the doors. There was a subtle tension in the air, almost like the town itself had taken notice of something, though no one had spoken about it yet. The regulars trickled in, sipping coffee and reading the paper as usual. But she could see the curiosity in their eyes. Some glanced at the empty seat in the corner where the man had sat the day before. Others whispered quietly among themselves, casting occasional looks toward her. She kept moving, preparing food and pouring coffee, trying not to let it show that she noticed. It didn't take long for the whispers to spread. By mid-morning, she started hearing bits and pieces from customers who came in or called from nearby shops. "Did you hear?" one woman asked, leaning on the counter. "Apparently someone saw a big biker in your diner yesterday. The cops were outside too. They say you stood up to them." She shook her head gently, not wanting to feed the gossip. "I just did what I thought was right," she said softly. She didn't need to make a big deal out of it. She had no interest in being a hero or drawing attention to herself. Still, she could feel the town buzzing quietly about what had happened. By lunchtime, the diner was busier than usual. People came in not just for food, but to catch a glimpse of the woman who had apparently stood up to the authorities for a biker. Some were curious, some were concerned, and a few were outright judgmental. "You really let him stay here?" one man asked, frowning. "A Hell's Angel, no less?" She smiled faintly, serving his meal. "Yes," she said simply. "I helped him because he needed it. That's all. I didn't do it for attention." Some customers left it at that, but others continued to gossip quietly. The woman could hear the words, but she didn't let them bother her. She had made her choice, and she knew it was the right one. Still, she couldn't shake a small worry at the back of her mind. Word travels fast, and she had no idea who else might hear about it. Meanwhile, the man himself had left the diner, but he didn't disappear entirely. He rode through nearby towns, quietly making his way back to his group. And slowly, the story of the woman who had protected him began to spread in the biker community. She had done something unexpected. She had offered kindness and safety to someone they respected, and that kind of act did not go unnoticed. Messages were passed from one rider to another, whispers on the road and in garages, until it reached the ears of those who cared about loyalty and respect above all else. Back in the diner, the woman continued her day, keeping herself busy. She noticed a few unfamiliar faces, people who came in not to eat but to watch, to see if she was really as brave as the story made her out to be. Some left after a few moments, unsure what to make of her. Others lingered quietly, ordering food but casting curious glances around the small space. She tried to ignore it, but her mind kept drifting back to the man and the choices they had both made. Later in the afternoon, she stepped outside to take a quick break. The air was warm, the sun soft on her skin, but there was an unease in the quiet street. She noticed a police car parked a few blocks away, though the officers didn't approach. They seemed to be watching but not acting. She sighed, understanding that her actions had consequences. Standing up for someone like that came with risk. She had faced danger in small ways before, but this was something different. Yet despite the fear, she felt a quiet sense of pride. She had done what she believed was right, and no one could take that away from her. As the day went on, more signs appeared that her actions were being noticed beyond the diner. A local shopkeeper mentioned seeing a few bikers riding past slowly, looking in the direction of her diner. Another customer casually mentioned hearing motorcycles in the distance late the night before, though none had come to her door. It was becoming clear that the news of her courage had traveled fast and not just in whispers. The biker community had begun to take note, curious about the woman who had helped one of their own without hesitation. The woman spent the evening cleaning the diner, reflecting on the past 2 days. She thought about the man who had come to her for help, about the gratitude he had shown, and about the lessons she had learned herself. People often feared what they didn't understand, judged too quickly, and acted without compassion. She had chosen to be different, and that choice had consequences, but also, perhaps, opportunities. She didn't know what would happen next, but she felt a quiet readiness in herself. By nightfall, the town had settled into its usual rhythm, though there was a lingering energy in the air, almost like anticipation. She closed the diner for the night, locking the doors carefully and taking a final look around. She was aware that her life might be changing in ways she couldn't predict, that her small act of courage had set events into motion, and yet she didn't regret it. She knew that standing up for someone in need was more important than fear or worry about gossip or judgment. As she walked to her small apartment above the diner, she noticed the lights of distant motorcycles on the horizon, though she wasn't sure if it was real or just her imagination. Still, the thought made her heart race. The man she had helped had returned safely to his group, and now there was a chance that others might come to show gratitude, or to see the woman who had acted without fear. She sat by her window for a while, watching the quiet town below. The streets were calm, the occasional car passing, the sounds of evening settling in. She thought about what courage really meant. Not the big gestures everyone noticed, but the small decisions made quietly, in moments of tension, that defined who a person really was. She thought about the man, about the trust he had placed in her, and about the ripple effect of that trust. One choice had set something in motion, and she had no idea where it would lead. Sleep came slowly that night, filled with dreams of motorcycles and the faces of people she barely knew. She dreamed of the man, of the conversations they had shared, and of the quiet bond that had formed between them. She woke in the morning with a sense of anticipation, an awareness that the world outside her diner had shifted slightly. Something was coming, though she didn't know what. The day ahead held possibilities she could not yet imagine, and she felt a mix of excitement and nerves. When she opened the diner the next morning, the first customers were her regulars, but there was something different about them. They greeted her with quiet smiles, a mixture of admiration and curiosity. The town had heard about what she had done, and people were beginning to see her differently, not just as the woman who ran the diner, but as someone who acted with courage and heart. Some whispered, some asked questions, but all carried the same undertone: respect. By mid-morning, the sound of distant motorcycles reached her ears. She froze for a moment, her mind racing. Could it be them? Could it be the bikers he had returned to, coming to see her for what she had done? She didn't know what to expect, but she felt ready. She had faced the police, faced fear, and made her choice. Whatever came next, she would meet it with the same quiet strength she had shown from the beginning. The woman moved through her diner, serving coffee and breakfast, her senses alert for the rumble of engines growing closer. The town outside went about its day, unaware of the approaching visitors, the ones who had heard the story and wanted to see the woman who had stood up for one of their own. There was a tension building now, a feeling that something significant was about to happen, though she didn't know exactly what. And as she wiped down the last table, she felt a strange calmness amidst the rising anticipation. She had acted with courage and kindness when it mattered most, and that choice had set events into motion that would change her life, and perhaps the lives of others around her, in ways she could not yet imagine. She was ready to face whatever came next, quietly confident that standing up for what was right, even in small ways, could lead to moments that were bigger than anyone could predict. The morning air was cool, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass and the faint hum of traffic in the distance. The woman opened her diner as usual, expecting the quiet routine of another ordinary day. The smell of coffee brewing and the sizzle of bacon filled the small space. She moved behind the counter, pouring drinks and wiping tables, her mind wandering briefly to the man who had come to her door days ago. She didn't know what he was planning or if she would see him again, but she felt a small spark of anticipation, a curiosity she couldn't quite explain. The first customers arrived, a few locals stopping by for breakfast, their conversation gentle and normal. The woman smiled, greeted them, and took their orders, keeping up her usual rhythm. But the peaceful morning was broken by a sound she had never expected to hear in her quiet town: the distant rumble of motorcycles. At first she thought it was a few riders passing through, but the noise grew louder and deeper, engines echoing down the empty streets. She paused, instinctively glancing out the window. One motorcycle appeared at the end of the street, then another and another, until dozens could be seen in the distance, their chrome and leather catching the sunlight. The rumble grew to a roar, and soon she realized what she was seeing: a large group of bikers moving together like a single powerful wave. Her heart skipped a beat and a sudden rush of nerves hit her. She had heard rumors the night before that the biker community had taken notice of her, but she never imagined this. She didn't know if they were coming to thank her, or if their visit might bring trouble. The bikers pulled into the diner's parking lot slowly, with precision and order, as if rehearsed. Engines stopped, the sound of metal settling, and a hush fell over the area. There were easily 200 of them, a sea of leather helmets and motorcycles stretching down the street. She could see patches on their jackets, symbols that told her they were members of the Hells Angels, the same group the man belonged to. Their presence was imposing, but she also noticed something unexpected. There was no chaos, no aggression. They were disciplined, moving with purpose, and yet there was a quiet respect in the way they approached. The woman stepped outside, unsure what to do. Her heart raced, but she held her head high, telling herself to stay calm. She watched as the first riders dismounted and approached the entrance. Their eyes were fixed on her, not with menace, but with curiosity and something else. Gratitude, she guessed. A tall man, clearly a leader, stepped forward and spoke first. His voice was low but carries authority. "We're here for the woman who helped one of our own," he said. "We heard about what you did and we wanted to thank you." The woman blinked, taken aback. She had expected tension, maybe even confrontation, but not this. I didn't do anything special," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "I just helped someone who needed it." The man shook his head. "What you did isn't something we forget easily. You gave him safety when he had nowhere else to go. That takes courage. That takes heart. We respect that." One by one, the bikers entered the diner, filling the space without pushing or causing chaos. The room, which had seemed so ordinary just moments before, now felt alive with energy. The hum of engines outside had been replaced with quiet conversations and the soft clinking of cups and plates. The woman moved carefully, serving coffee and food where she could, noticing how polite the bikers were despite their size and reputation. They weren't here to cause trouble. They were here to show respect. As the morning went on, she began to understand the depth of their gratitude. Some bikers spoke quietly to her, offering words of thanks, telling her how much her actions meant to their friend. Others left small tokens, a patch, a coin, a piece of leather crafted by hand. Each gift carried meaning, a symbol of the respect they held for her courage. She accepted them humbly, feeling a strange mix of pride and disbelief. The diner, once a simple place for breakfast and coffee, had become a hub of emotion and gratitude. She noticed the way the bikers treated each other, their loyalty and discipline, the way they moved and spoke with a sense of unity. It was unlike anything she had ever seen in her quiet town. Despite their fearsome reputation, there was humanity in their actions, a reminder that appearances could be deceiving. At one point, the man who had first come to her diner entered quietly, standing near the back. He didn't speak immediately, just observed. When their eyes met, he gave a small nod, an acknowledgement of shared understanding and respect. He didn't need words. The moment said enough. She felt a surge of emotion, gratitude, relief, and a deep sense of connection. Time passed slowly, and the bikers stayed longer than she expected. They didn't eat excessively or cause a mess. Instead, they lingered, sharing stories quietly among themselves and occasionally turning to speak with her. She learned a little about their world, the sense of loyalty, the unspoken rules, the importance of honor. It fascinated her, though she didn't pretend to understand it fully. She only knew that they had come because of her, and their presence carried a weight she couldn't ignore. Outside, more motorcycles waited in the street, parked carefully, engines silent. She realized that the gathering extended beyond the diner itself. The bikers had come as a group, a display of solidarity, but also a show of respect that was more profound than anything she had expected. The small diner she ran in her quiet town had become a place of legend, if only for a few hours because of a single act of courage and kindness. By midday, the bikers began to leave, one group after another, each taking the time to nod, smile, or offer a quiet word of thanks. The man who had first come to her diner stayed for a few moments longer, walking up to her and speaking softly. "You didn't know it then, but you changed something for all of us," he said. "Your courage didn't just help me. It reminded everyone here that kindness still exists. You've made an impact, and that's rare." She shook her head, tears forming slightly in her eyes. "I just did what I thought was right," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never expected all this." He smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and respect in his expression. "You earned it," he said. "People like you who act without fear, without expectation, that's something worth remembering. Don't forget that." Finally, he turned and walked toward the door, pausing briefly to look back at her. The other bikers were already leaving, engines starting, and the roar of motorcycles filled the street again. She watched them ride away one by one, until the last bike disappeared down the road, leaving a silence that was almost as powerful as their presence. She closed the door and leaned against it, breathing deeply, trying to process what had just happened. Her diner had returned to quiet, but she felt a new energy within herself. The respect, gratitude, and trust shown to her by people who were often misunderstood had changed something inside her. She realized that courage and kindness were not always recognized immediately, but when they were, the impact could be profound and far-reaching. The rest of the day passed slowly, the diner returning to its usual rhythm, but there was a lingering sense of awe. Customers who came in couldn't help but speak of the morning's events. The woman smiled quietly, accepting their admiration with modesty, though she knew that what mattered most wasn't recognition. It was the knowledge that she had acted from her heart and that her actions had made a difference. As evening fell, she sat by the window reflecting on the events of the day. The street outside was calm now, the rumble of motorcycles gone, but she could still feel the energy of what had happened. She thought about the man who had come to her diner, the bikers who had arrived to show respect, and the small choices that had set these events in motion. It was a reminder that one person's courage, one act of kindness, could ripple outward in ways that were unpredictable and profound. She realized that life was full of unexpected moments where people crossed paths in ways that changed everything, and today had been one of those moments. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and the unknown, and she had acted with integrity. The result had been overwhelming, humbling, and deeply human. As night settled over the town, she closed the diner, locking the doors carefully. She stood for a moment outside, looking at the empty street, imagining the motorcycles that had roared through earlier. The memory brought a smile to her face, a reminder that courage, kindness, and human connection were forces stronger than appearances, reputation, or fear. And in her small diner, in her quiet town, she had witnessed the power of these forces firsthand. The morning after the bikers' visit, the diner felt unusually quiet. The woman arrived early, unlocking the doors with a calm but thoughtful expression. The events of the previous day still lingered in her mind. The roar of engines, the sea of leather jackets, the nods of respect from people who, not long ago, would have seemed intimidating. She poured a cup of coffee and took a slow sip, feeling the warmth and letting the memories settle. It was hard to believe that something so ordinary, a small diner in a quiet town, had become the center of attention for a group as large and disciplined as the Hells Angels. Regular customers arrived first, their chatter light, but there was an unmistakable change in their tone. Some looked at her with new respect, others with curiosity, as if trying to reconcile the woman they knew with the woman who had stood up for a man on the run. "Heard what happened yesterday?" one of them said quietly as she refilled his coffee. "I didn't expect anyone in town to do something like that." She smiled gently, shaking her head. "I just did what felt right," she said. She didn't need recognition, and she knew that her actions spoke louder than words. The diner filled steadily, though the buzz of the previous day was gone. People were more subdued, almost reflective, as if they too had felt the ripple of something extraordinary. Some came not just for food, but to catch a glimpse of the woman who had acted with courage. She moved behind the counter, serving plates of eggs, bacon, and pancakes, listening politely to small talk while thinking about the man who had first come to her door and the bikers who had arrived to show their gratitude. She remembered the quiet nod he had given her before leaving the diner the day before. That small gesture carried more weight than words could express. It wasn't just a thank you. It was an acknowledgement of shared understanding and respect. He had trusted her, and she had honored that trust. That moment alone had shifted something in her, a reminder that even small actions, when done with integrity, could make a profound impact. As the day went on, she noticed subtle changes in the town. People walked with a little more awareness, a little more respect for those around them. Conversations at local shops carried hints of admiration for the woman who had chosen courage over fear. She didn't seek these conversations, but she could sense them, and they brought a quiet satisfaction. Her diner, once just a place for meals and casual talk, had become a place where people remembered acts of kindness, a small landmark of human integrity in a world that often overlooked such gestures. By midday, she received a visit from someone she hadn't expected, a local reporter. He introduced himself politely and explained that he had heard about the events at her diner. "People are talking about what happened here," he said. "They say you protected a member of the Hells Angels from the police and that over 200 bikers came to your diner to show gratitude. It's remarkable. Would you mind sharing your side of the story?" She paused, considering her words carefully. She didn't want to sensationalize what had happened, didn't want the story to turn into something that distorted the truth. "I didn't do anything extraordinary," she said softly. "I helped someone in need. That's all. People can take it from there, but the reason I acted wasn't for attention or recognition. It was just the right thing to do." The reporter nodded, clearly impressed by her humility. He promised to write the story with care, emphasizing her courage and compassion rather than creating drama. She appreciated that. She wanted the focus to be on humanity, on the small acts that can ripple outward, changing lives quietly but meaningfully. Later in the afternoon, the diner began to quiet down. The rush had ended, leaving only a few regulars lingering over coffee and pie. She wiped down the counters, reflecting on everything that had happened. The man who had come to her diner had returned safely to his group, and she knew that the biker's visit was a direct result of the trust and respect he had communicated. What had started as a moment of fear and uncertainty had transformed into a display of gratitude, human connection, and mutual respect. She thought about the bikers themselves, the discipline, loyalty, and sense of honor she had witnessed. They had shown her a side of humanity often misunderstood or judged harshly by outsiders. She realized that courage and kindness were not limited by appearance, reputation, or past mistakes. Even people the world labels as dangerous can recognize and honor integrity when they see it. That lesson stayed with her, quietly reshaping how she viewed those around her. In the quiet moments, she also reflected on her own growth. She had acted decisively under pressure, faced uncertainty, and chosen to protect someone who needed help. She realized that courage wasn't about seeking recognition or avoiding fear. It was about doing what felt right, even when the outcome was unknown. That understanding gave her a new confidence, a reminder that small acts could have lasting, profound effects. Days passed, and the story of her diner spread beyond the town. People from nearby areas came to see the woman who had shown courage and compassion. Some were curious, some inspired, but all were touched by the idea that one person's integrity could ripple outward, influencing others in ways that were often unexpected. She welcomed them quietly, serving food and coffee with the same warmth she had always offered. She didn't need to be a hero. The respect and gratitude she had received were enough. The man returned briefly one afternoon, stopping at the diner for a short visit. He didn't stay long, just enough to nod and smile and to acknowledge her quietly. No words were needed between them. The shared understanding, the trust, and the bond that had formed in a few short days were clear in that simple gesture. She realized that connections like these, brief but meaningful, could leave lasting impressions on both people involved. By the end of the week, her diner had returned to a new sense of normal. The excitement had faded, replaced by a steady rhythm.